In the concrete jungle that is Seoul, if you look hard enough, you can find some beautiful traditional Korean houses called hanok. While many people still live in high-rise apartment buildings, it's become somewhat of a trend here in Korea to renovate old hanoks, whether it be for businesses like cafes or guest houses, or just for someone to live in. And one of the leading architects in Seoul for converting such hanoks for modern use is Daniel Taendler, co-founder of the architecture firm Urban Detail, and he's our special guest for this week's Touch Base in Seoul. Mr. Taendler, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So first off, can you tell us a little bit about yourself to our listeners? Can you tell us about your background and how long you've been working in Korea as an architect?
Sure. I'm originally from Germany, but my mom is Korean. She was one of the Korean nurses who went to Germany in the 60s and 70s. So I tend to say I'm both German and Korean. So much about my identity. Yes, and I've been living and working in Seoul for about 10 years now. And the first years I was employed at a local architecture firm, and then I started my own firm with a Korean friend and colleague. And yes, we have been working with Urban Detail for a couple of years now.
So you've been here for quite a while then, you said, 10 years.
Yes, it's been a while.
So with, I'm guessing, a Korean mother, that means you had Korean influences around your whole life then. And I'm guessing that's where you fell in love with Korean hanok and Korean architecture.
Well, yes, for me, like Korea has never been like a foreign place. So we would visit quite frequently when I was a kid. And I also have my childhood memories of coming to Korea and staying at my relatives' places, some of who lived in hanok back then. So I also do have some fond childhood memories of, staying in a hanok.
Ah, okay.
So maybe that's where it comes from, because I've always appreciated and liked it. And yes, somehow it turned into my profession and my way.
So it wasn't just looking at hanoks from afar, you actually have a personal connection with hanok as you were growing up. Then you studied architecture in Germany, I understand,
Yes.
but even as a student, you were working on hanok architecture. That must have been quite challenging, studying hanok while you were in Germany as well.
It was because, as you might know, my major originally was economics, and then I decided to change my way because it wasn't quite for me. And I had this idea in my head, like I knew I liked Korean traditional culture and most of it probably hanok. So I got this idea, but in the beginning it was really not easy because I started to research, I started to talk to people, and everyone said, well, even if you want to learn about hanok and want to work with hanok, there's not an official way you can do this, even in Korea. So I was advised to study architecture in Germany, basically, at that time.
Right,
It's a bit different now. Things have improved a lot, but back then it was still quite difficult.
So you say things have changed quite a lot. How has it changed now? So you're saying back then there was very little information about how you could study hanok, but has that really become a thing of the past now?
Yes, a lot of research has been done and people have been working on it very hard. And back then it was even impossible to get any literature about hanok in English even. Like in German, I didn't expect it, but even in English, I wouldn't be able to find any books about Korean traditional architecture. So back then, there was basically almost nothing available.
So within that time of 10 years, things have changed quite a lot then.
Yes.
Why do you think that has happened?
Well, the time I got interested was during the early days when also in Korea, the interest in hanok just started to appear again. Like there was some places that would work with hanok, like my first employer was one of those. And I think because of the rise in interest, probably also there was more funding and so on. So there were people at universities, professors that have done a lot of research, and a lot of architects, some local architects who've done incredible work. So it's progressing, and it started progress back then, but there was just so few to start from in the beginning, right?
That's great to hear. That means Korea can preserve some of its culture and history, even when a city like Seoul, where everything is modern, we can still keep that part of historic Seoul in Korea. But working with hanok houses, that must present some unique and difficult challenges. How was it? I mean, for you, it was a dream to work on hanok houses, but then once you started, how was it?
Well, of course, people always are enlightened when they hear, oh, you work with hanok, oh, that's so cool. But as you might probably, it might probably not be so hard to imagine that the actual work can be quite complicated.
Right.
When it comes to regulations, if you renovate a building, the old buildings very often they don't fit with modern construction laws. So you always have to find a way to implicate things and to do your work. And also you can get subsidies, for example, which is a very good thing, but the whole process to get it can be quite exhausting at times. So it's a lot of work, and it's like, just to be honest, it's hard to make a decent living with it, actually.
Right, wow, okay. Yeah. Even working technically, though, must be difficult as well. I mean, the hanok frames are made of wood, which are perishable, and things like that. So that must be presented its own challenges.
It has, but unfortunately, we have very, very capable teams who can do the work. So it's actually not our part to construct the building. Like, there is this whole knowledge out there, and we have to work together with the carpenters, for example. So it's not that I have to know 100% everything about hanok, to be honest.
Right.
Because we work together with the traditional carpenters and other traditional craftsmen. And as a team, probably I can say is the best way to create a hanok.
Your company, Urban Detail, I understand, does a lot of work on hanoks, but it's not the only work that you do.
Yes.
You work with other projects as well. Can you tell us a bit about them?
Yes. Well, actually, I consider myself to be an architect first, even though it was hanok that has led me to architecture. Personally, I don't think there's such a thing as a hanok architect, because I think hanok is architecture. It has its specifics. And as an architect, it's not that you can just work with hanok when you know nothing about it, of course. So you have to work on your knowledge and improve it. But at the same time, I think as an architect, it's not only about hanok. It's also about integrating the traditional understanding of space and so on into modern architecture at some point. So our work is traditional. We do a lot of work with hanok. We do remodeling of hanoks. We create new hanok. But also in the future, what I would like to do more is work with modern architecture and try to reinterpret traditional spaces and architecture into a modern form.
Right, so updating perhaps what's already there, the traditional hanok architecture, and then into the modern kind of world we see now. From what I've seen as well, from the hanoks I've seen in Seoul, such as Pukchon in downtown Seoul, it's very rare to see a perfectly preserved hanok. A lot of it is updated to modern lifestyles. So has that changed hanok design over the years?
Well, certainly it has, yes. And sometimes it's a bit difficult if we talk about preservation, because in my view, it's not so much preservation of hanok as historic buildings, because many buildings that are remodeled are like remade in a different way from what they were. But if you want to live in a hanok, you need modern facilities anyway. So to a certain extent, we have to do this. But sometimes I think we should also think a bit more about what is really historic and has to be preserved as historic, because in my view, the understanding of what is historic is sometimes, unfortunately, a little bit narrow here.
Has there been interest from overseas now about Korean architecture as well? For example, have you had any working on hanok projects overseas? Has there been interest like that?
I haven't worked on such a project overseas. We got a couple of inquiries.
Is that even possible? Because the whole point of is hanok is you're updating or renovating something that's already there, right?
Well, okay, there's two things we have to think about if we talk about hanok abroad. First thing is it's our traditional architecture here. So I don't come to Korea and start to build traditional German houses, right? So hanok, they belong to Korea because they've evolved here. They fit with Korea, with the landscape, with the culture and everything. So if we just plant a hanok into some other foreign country, we would have to ask why we do it. So there might be some exemptions, like representative projects for certain facilities. I would say that's okay. maybe if a private person wants to do it, we could think about it. But the second problem is maybe it's possible that I could get all the teams we need over to Germany, for example, and build a hanok. But if we can fit it to the local construction laws, of course. But let's pretend we can do this. Who's going to maintain the building? For example, the traditional roof, a modern German roofer couldn't do anything on the traditional Korean roof. So we would run into problems. And that's something we would have to consider before we implement such a project abroad.
Right, a lot of complications and considerations to think about.
And I think the work has to be done here anyway, so yes.
And finally, what are your future projects that you're working on? You've worked on hanok projects for, as you said, like over 10 years now. Is your passion for hanok architecture still there?
Yeah, of course. Otherwise, I wouldn't do it. It's a work, you need a certain amount of passion for it. Otherwise, you will ask yourself, oh, why am I doing this? As I said, it's quite difficult to make a decent income with this work. But I love my work, so I'm still doing it and will do it in the future. The reason is the projects are mainly small and it's a lot of work. But we are working currently on one project in Seoul, which is the area near, like west of Gyeongbuk Palace. And that building is almost completed. And we have 2 more projects in Eunpyeong, where there is a newly created neighborhood just for hanok. And I hope those projects will turn out well too.
Well, good luck with that. It's been really fascinating to talk to you today. We've been speaking to Daniel Taendler, co-founder of the architecture firm Urban Detail. Thank you for coming in today, and it's been wonderful to have you here with us.
Thank you very much.